Graham Young was born into chaos. Born in London in the late 40s, he was born to loving parents. Unfortunately, his mother died just a few months after birth, and his father felt he could not cope raising his own children and thus sent them to live with relatives. Graham Young was sent to an aunt and uncle's, whereas his sister was sent to their grandparents. In most aspects, Graham Young had a relatively ordinary childhood, given the circumstances. However, one thing made him stand out. Graham Young had an unhealthy obsession with poisons and, more worryingly, the effects of poisons on the human body. The young Graham Young found himself returned to living with his father, sister, and a new stepmother, before starting secondary school. He managed to pass his 11+ and qualify for one of the best schools in the area. Graham Young was proving to be an intelligent and ambitious child. Things were going well for the family, that is, until 1961, when a then 14-year-old Graham Young decided to begin testing poisons on his own family, generally administering these through the teas he was tasked with making. During the February of 1961, Molly Young, Graham's stepmother, began suffering from vomiting, diarrhea, and agonizing stomach cramps. She initially dismissed this as an illness that would pass, but before her husband Tom also began to show the same symptoms. Surprisingly, both children living in the household, Winifred and Graham, suffered the same symptoms from the mystery illness. Doctors had been notified and could not discover the cause. What's worse, the illness seemed to be infectious, as a couple of children at Graham's school also suffered from sickness, diarrhea, and stomach pain. One morning, while brewing his sister a poison tea, Graham accidentally overdid the usual dosage. Winifred was aware of the strange taste in the tea, so she threw it away after only taking a single mouthful, before leaving for work. While on the train to work, Winifred began to hallucinate and had to be escorted rapidly to the hospital. Doctors took blood work and discovered traces of Atropa belladonna in her system. They were able to deduce that she had somehow ingested the highly toxic plant and notified her parents. Fred Young was instantly suspicious of his son and confronted him regarding the matter. Graham tried to deflect the blame onto his sister, who he claimed had been mixing shampoos in the teacups. Graham wasn't believed, however, and was subjected to a full room search, in which nothing incriminating was found. Fred issued a warning to his son to be more careful with those bloody chemicals. Months later, Graham's stepmother suffered a car accident and didn't seem to be recovering. Her health continued to go downhill until she passed away in 1962. Nothing indicated foul play or that Graham was involved in any way. That was until his father also became seriously ill and was found to be suffering from antimony poisoning, and was only a single dose away from death. Graham's chemistry teacher became suspicious of the boy after finding a number of chemicals in his desk. Graham soon found himself in police custody. Unfortunately, an autopsy could not be carried out on his stepmother, as she had been cremated very quickly after her death, something Graham had pushed for. Graham was placed in Broadmoor Mental Hospital, a psychiatric hospital for criminals who are in need of psychiatric care. He was the youngest patient to stay at the institution at the time, and lived within those walls for 9 years. Having been deemed a changed man, he was released in 1971 after the prison psychiatrist wrote that he is no longer obsessed with poisons, violence, and mischief. However, this was not at all the case. Graham had spent his time in prison honing his knowledge. He'd read as many medical books as he could get his hands on, becoming an expert in poisons and the human body. Experiments continued, this time not on his family, but instead on his fellow inmates and some prison staff. One such staff member was killed, although Graham was somehow not indicted in the death. Upon his release from prison, Graham needed a job. He wanted to use his extremely detailed knowledge of chemicals and thus search for the only factory in London to use thallium, a chemical compound that fascinated him. Upon finding a job, he was disappointed to learn that the chemical was not stored on site and was instead ordered in. A chemist on the other side of London would instead provide the poisons for Graham's experiments. Strangely, Broadmoor Hospital, which acted as Graham's reference for his new job, did not disclose why he was imprisoned, and therefore they saw no issues with letting the new boy make teas for his colleagues. Graham instantly took a dislike to his foreman Bob. He was everything Graham despised, confident and well liked. Bob's teas began to be laced with high doses of poison, which absolutely destroyed his insides. Bob's health rapidly deteriorated, and he was hospitalized before not long later succumbing to death. This new mystery illness swept through the factory. Many people were reporting in sick, some able to recover with a few days at home, but others being hospitalized and coming very close to death. This illness was named the Bovingdon bug, and once again doctors failed to find the cause. The illness would not let up, and more people suffered through horrendous pain. Bob's successor was also admitted to hospital with pain, but immediately quit his job, an act that likely saved his life. Fred Biggs would become Graham's fourth and final fatality, after he was admitted to London's Hospital for Nervous Systems and succumbed to the deterioration of his body. Staff members were gathered together in the staff room during the investigation as police began to question staff members to get to the bottom of the mystery. Graham Young's arrogance would be the thing that would undo him. Young asked the company doctor if the investigators had considered thallium poisoning. He had also told another colleague that his hobby was the study of toxic chemicals. Red flags began to crop up around the T-boy that had extensive knowledge of poisons. Graham's colleague went to the police, who ran a background search on him, only to discover the reason for his incarceration at Broadmoor. A search team descended on his home and found antimony, thallium and aconitine, alongside a detailed diary of the dosage history for each of his experiments. Graham Young's trial lasted only 10 days. He pleaded not guilty, claiming the diary was part of a novel that he was writing. A jury found him guilty and he was sentenced to life imprisonment. The press dubbed him the Teacup Poisoner, a name in which he is said to have despised. During his 19-year stay in prison before his death of a heart attack aged 41, Graham befriended Moor's murderer Ian Brady, as the two shared a fascination of Nazi Germany. So what are your thoughts on the case? Leave your comments down below. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. More content will be coming very soon.